This log is my final testament. Let the cold, uncaring void be my confessor, for the God Emperor has long since turned his gaze from the likes of us. My name is Casilia von Valerius, and I am a murderer in waiting, a matricide of the soul, a fratricide of the flesh. The truth of it tastes like rust and ash in my mouth. But here, in the silent witness of this data slate, the truth must be given its due. All that we do for the continuation of the line, for the sanctity of the warrant. That is the first and last lie we tell ourselves. Our dynasty is dying. It is a slow, opulent rot, like a patriarch drowning in a vat of amasec. You can see it in the tarnished gilt of the archways aboard our flagship, the Gilded Serpent. You can hear it in the groaning of the plasma conduits, a constant thrum of complaint from a machine spirit stretched thin across millennia of service. You can smell it in the very air of the hereditary command deck, a cloying mixture of ozone from failing power relays, the incense of desperate prayer, and the faint, sweet odor of decay that even the most advanced Medicae apparatus cannot entirely scrub away. It is the smell of my father, Lord-Captain Theos von Valerius, the astropath primus of our bloodline, surrendering his magnificent, terrible life, one shuddering breath at a time. I am standing in his sanctum now. The room is a cathedral of hubris. Faded tapestries depict our ancestors wresting fortunes from dead worlds and negotiating treaties with alien grotesques the Ordo Xenos would burn us for knowing. Display cases hold skulls of creatures that have not drawn breath since before the age of strife. And in the center of it all is the throne, now a web of crystalline tubes and whirring diagnostic servitors, within which my father's wasted form is cradled. He is less a man than a component, another part of the ship's ancient, failing systems. His skin is the color of bleached parchment, stretched thin over a skeletal frame. Wires as fine as spun silver snake from his temples, feeding his fading consciousness with stimulants, and parsing the dregs of his thoughts for any last command. His breath is a wet, mechanical wheeze, the sound of a bellows with a hole in it, amplified by a vox emitter nestled against his throat. I come here not out of love, not anymore. Love is a currency we von Valerius cannot afford. I come here to watch, to learn, to calculate. I track the fluctuating power draws of his life support, cross-referencing them with the ship's overall energy consumption. I note the diminishing efficacy of the nutrient solutions, a simple matter of logistics. His death is an eventuality to be managed, a final transaction in a life defined by them. His legacy, the warrant of trade that grants us kingship beyond the Imperium's grasp, is the only thing that matters now. It is the soul of our dynasty, the serpent devouring its own tail. And it will soon require a new head. The doors to the sanctum hiss open, their servo motors grinding in protest. They were designed to glide open with silent, imperious grace. Now, like everything else, they betray their age. And through them strides my brother, Lucian. If I am the cold, hard logic of our dynasty, Lucian is its fiery, calamitous heart. He is a supernova of charisma and reckless ambition. He enters the chamber not as a son, visiting his dying father, but as an heir, surveying his inheritance. He is dressed in a coat of void black velvet, its collar and cuffs stitched with thread of gold, in patterns that mimic the star charts of the Coronis expanse. A jewel-encrusted dueling pistol is slung low on his hip, a statement of intent rather than a practical weapon. He smells of spiced wine and the Raresian perfume he so favors, a scent that is entirely out of place in this sterile, morbid chamber. It is an act of defiance against the decay that surrounds us. "Casilia," he says, his voice a rich baritone that has charmed planetary governors and swayed mutinous crews. He smiles, a flash of brilliant white teeth. "Still counting the lumens, dear sister? One would think you were the ship's engine's ear, not its future matriarch." "Someone must," I reply, my own voice flat, devoid of the warmth he so effortlessly projects. I do not turn from my father's throne. Someone must ensure the lights remain on long enough for there to be a future. He chuckles, the sound echoing unnaturally in the vaulted chamber. He walks over, his boots clicking on the polished marble, and places a hand on my shoulder. It is meant to be a gesture of comfort, of shared grief. I feel it as a weight, a claim. Always so practical. That is why you are the anchor, and I am the sail. We need both to navigate the currents of the void. An anchor and a sail. That is how he sees us. He, the glorious explorer, pushing us ever forward into greater glory and greater danger. Me, the dreary necessity, holding us back, keeping us safe. He has never understood that an anchor, cut loose in a storm, is just dead weight that drags the entire vessel to the depths. And Lucian is a walking tempest. His ventures are legendary, his triumphs celebrated in void shanties from Port Wander to the heathen stars. But I have seen the ledgers. For every world he has brought to compliance, another has been lost to his carelessness. For every archaeotech treasure he has unearthed, he has squandered 10 times its value on grand follies and lavish celebrations. He believes the Warrant is a license for glory. I know it is a burden of survival. "He is fading," Lucian says, his tone finally softening as he looks upon the ruin of our father. "The chirurgeons say it could be hours, or it could be weeks. The old man's heart is as stubborn as a grox." "His heart is a pump," I correct him, my gaze fixed on a flickering lumen on the diagnostic slate. A failing one. It is the machine spirit of this cradle that keeps it beating, and its spirit is weary. Before he can offer another poetic platitude, it happens. A flicker, not just in the lumen, but in the entire chamber. The lights dim for a half-second. The rhythmic wheeze from the vox emitter attached to our father's throat stutters, replaced by a surge of static. A Medicae servitor twitches, its chrome claws spasming. And then a voice, not the amplified hiss of a dying man's breath, but a true voice, thin and dry as papyrus, scraping its way from the depths of a ruined body. "Children." Lucian and I freeze. We turn as one towards the throne. Our father's eyes, milky with cataracts and age, are open. They are not focused on us, but on something beyond, something in the star-dusted darkness visible through the chamber's great armored viewport. For a horrifying moment, I think he sees the Emperor himself come to claim his soul. "The Warrant," he rasps, the words fragmented, broken. A trickle of bloody fluid seeps from the corner of his mouth. My serpent's coil, it must not be broken. Lucian steps forward, his bravado replaced by a rare, genuine awe. Father, we are here. The dynasty is strong. We will carry your name to the farthest stars. The ancient eyes shift, a slow, agonizing rotation in their sockets. They seem to find us, to truly see us, for the first time in months. A flicker of the old intelligence, the predatory cunning that built an empire among the void, sparks in their depths. The Xylos Compact, he whispers, the name of our current precarious negotiation with an isolationist forge moon on the sector's edge. A deal that will either secure our fuel supply for the next century or plunge us into a ruinous trade war. Together, you must conclude it. He coughs, a wet, rattling sound that shakes his entire frame. The servitors around him whir into a higher state of activity, administering palliatives and stabilizing his vitals.
Prove your worth, he manages, his gaze moving between me and my brother. And then he says the words that will change everything. The words that I now know were a death sentence for one of us. The hidden codicil. Find it. Uphold it. The serpent has only one head. And then he is gone. The light in his eyes extinguishes. The mechanical wheezing resumes its steady, monotonous rhythm. The moment of lucidity has passed. Lord-Captain Theos von Valerius has retreated back into the machine. Silence hangs heavy in the room, broken only by the hum of the cradle. Lucian turns to me, his face alight with a fervent, almost religious zeal. You heard him, sister, a final test. He wants us to secure the compact together as a final proof of our joint worthiness to succeed him. The codicil must be a blessing, a final piece of wisdom to guide our shared reign. I stare at him, a cold dread coiling in my gut like a hibernating viper. He sees a glorious trial. He hears the word together and thinks of unity. I hear a death knell. I see a predator's final lesson to his offspring. Prove your worth, not yours plural, your singular. A competition. The serpent has only one head. It was not a metaphor for leadership. It was a statement of fact, a decree. My brother, my handsome, charming, ruinous brother, claps me on the shoulder again, his energy completely restored. Come, we have a compact to forge. The Xylosians won't know what hit them, the twin heads of House von Valerius. We will make Father proud. He strides from the room, already bellowing for his chief seneschal, his mind alight with plans for grand diplomatic gestures and triumphant celebrations. He does not see the look on my face. He does not feel the chill that has settled deep into my bones. He heard a promise of shared glory. I heard a warrant for assassination. Father did not set us a final test to complete together.
He placed us in a cage, locked the door, and declared that only one of us was permitted to walk out. The seed of change was not the chance to save our dynasty. It was the terrible, logical necessity of choosing which of his children he would sacrifice to it. And in that moment, I knew with the certainty of a calculated astropathic jump that he had left the final, awful choice to us. My brother's laughter echoed down the corridor long after he had gone, a ghost of a sound that promised glory and ruin in equal measure. I remained in the sanctum, the chill of my discovery seeping into my marrow, a coldness no velvet cloak or spiced wine could ever warm. He saw a shared trial. I saw a gladiatorial arena for two. He heard a call to unity. I heard the sharpening of a sacrificial knife. I watched the steady pulse of the Medicae display, the green line representing my father's life, and for the first time I saw it not as a reprieve, but as a countdown. Every beat of his failing heart was another moment for Lucian to steer our dynasty towards the rocks, another grain of sand slipping through the hourglass. The hidden codicil, that was the key, the final commandment from our dying god. I had to find it. I had to know the exact wording of my brother's death warrant. My search did not begin in the ship's central librarium, a place of gilded shelves and servitor scribes that Lucian often used for poetic inspiration. Such a secret would not be left to the frailties of common data slates or the gossip of cloistered cognoscenti. It would be part of the warrant itself, an addendum etched into the very soul of our dynasty. And the warrant of trade was not kept, it was enshrined. I left the sanctum, my stride purposeful, my expression a mask of cold neutrality that betrayed none of the turmoil within. My path took me away from the inhabited spires, down gravity lifts that groaned with millennial fatigue, into the skeletal heart of the Gilded Serpent.
Down here, the opulent decay was stripped away, replaced by the honest decrepitude of ancient machinery. The air was thick with the scent of sacred unguents and the tang of ionized particles. Votive candles, placed in niches by generations of tech priests, guttered in the recycled airflow, casting long, dancing shadows that writhed like tormented spirits. My destination was the Sanctum Chartarum, the vault of maps, though it held far more than mere star charts. It was the dynasty's memory, its soul, encased in a chronometer-locked adamantium-plated sphere suspended by magnetic containment fields in the exact geometric center of the ship. Access required the blood of von Valerius, a specific canticle keyed to my own vocal imprint, and a psychic resonance that only our bloodline possessed. As the great circular door irised open with a sigh of displaced atmosphere, I stepped into a realm of absolute order. Here there was no dust, no decay. The air was sterile, chilled to the point of preservation. Cradled in the sanctum's core was the Warrant. It was not a scroll of parchment as lesser charters were. It was a crystalline data codex, a relic of the dark age of technology, its facets glittering with a faint internal light, pulsing in time with the ship's plasma core. It contained trillions of terabytes of data, our history, our compacts, our secrets, our sins. Its surface was cool and smooth beneath my trembling fingertips. I placed my palm against the activation rune. The crystal flared to life, bathing the sanctum in an ethereal blue glow. High Gothic script, elegant and merciless, scrolled through the air before me, a projection of pure information. I bypassed the histories, the trade agreements, the litanies of acquisition. My mind, trained in the arts of the logister and the analyst, sifted through the terabytes of archaic legalese with a speed that would have burned out a lesser intellect. I was looking for a ghost, a whisper in the data stream, and I found it, not as a separate file, but as a latent, encrypted mimetic trigger, hidden within the Warrant's primary oath of fealty. A bloodlock, keyed to the imminent biological failure of the current warrant holder. My father's decline had unlocked it. The script that appeared before me was older, its lettering more angular, more severe. It was the foundational text,
the original grant from the hand of a Terran High Lord long since turned to dust. Let it be known that the vessel of this sacred warrant, the Serpent of the Void, shall brook no division of its will. As a man possesseth but one soul, so too shall the dynasty possess but one master. The Serpent's coil is a chain of singular authority, passed from one to the next, unbroken. A second head upon its body is an abomination, a schism of purpose that invites only ruin and the hungry dark. The line must be maintained, the authority absolute, the will indivisible. By this seal, let the succession be decided, and let the unworthy be rendered unto the void, that the serpent may travel whole. There it was, cold, precise, and utterly without mercy. Rendered unto the void. It was not a metaphor. It was a command. My breath caught in my chest, a painful, ragged thing. There was no ambiguity here, not for one who was willing to see. Lucian's talk of twin heads was not just naive, it was blasphemy against the very core of our power. Father had not been setting a test of cooperation. He had been invoking the oldest law of our house, a terrible engine of Darwinian selection, designed to ensure that only the most ruthless, the most dedicated, the most singular in purpose would ever hold the warrant. He had pitted us against each other because the dynasty's survival was more important than the lives of his children. I felt a surge of ice-cold clarity. It was not hatred for my brother that filled me, but a profound and terrible pity. He was a lamb decorated for a sacrifice he did not even know was happening. And I was the priestess tasked with wielding the blade. My transformation began in the cold silence of that sanctum. The part of me that was a sister, the part that remembered laughing with Lucian as we raced servitors through the lower decks as children, that part began to wither. In its place grew a chilling pragmatism, the cold calculus of the warrant itself. The dynasty, the line, the will. These were not mere words. They were the entities to which I now owed my allegiance. My love for my brother was a liability. My grief, a weakness. They had to be excised. I returned to the upper decks to find Lucian had already begun his diplomacy. He had arranged a formal banquet for the Xylosian delegation, led by an entity named Archmagos Plenipotentiary Vex. The Xylosians were not men of flesh and wine, but of logic and sacred oils. They were a splinter faction of the Mechanicus, so dogmatic and insular that they made the priesthood of Mars look like free-thinking libertines. Theirs was a world of pure data, of function and efficiency. To treat with them required precision, patience, and a deep respect for their machine deity. Lucian, in his infinite arrogance, believed it required charm. The grand feasting hall was a disaster painted in gold leaf. Lucian had ordered the finest delicacies from a dozen worlds, foods that dripped with sauces and steamed with exotic spices, laid out before envoys who likely subsisted on nutrient paste and viewed organic matter as a messy corruption of perfect machinery. He had hired musicians to play rousing anthems of conquest, their melodies anathema to the pure mathematical music of the spheres the Xylosians revered.
I watched from the shadows of an archway as Lucian, magnificent in a coat of shimmering scale mail that mimicked our house sigil, raised a crystal goblet of priceless amasec. Archmagos Vex and his two acolytes stood rigid, their red robes immaculate, their augmetic eyes glowing with a flat, analytical light. They had not touched the food. They had not acknowledged the music. They simply stood, observing, calculating. "To the future!" Lucian boomed, his voice echoing through the hall. "To the union of von Valerius ambition and Xylosian industry. A partnership of the human spirit and the well-oiled machine." He drained his goblet and slammed it down, a gesture of boisterous camaraderie. Archmagos Vex tilted its head, a motion so slight it was almost imperceptible. A vox emitter on its chest crackled to life, the voice a synthesized monotone, devoid of all inflection. "Your definition of partnership is imprecise. We have offered a contract for the supply of 3.2 teratons of processed promethium in exchange for exclusive access to the Archaeotech data cores recovered from the star barge Righteous Gain. The term ambition is not a quantifiable variable in this equation. The human spirit is an irrelevant biochemical phenomenon." Lucian laughed, a great rolling sound of disbelief. He saw a lack of social grace, not a statement of profound philosophical difference. "Irrelevant? My dear Archmagos, the human spirit is what built this ship. It is what carves empires from the darkness between stars. It is the fire that your machines merely serve to stoke. Even your great Omnissiah, the cog god you worship, was once a man, was he not? A man with a great spirit." A wave of absolute silence fell over the hall. Even the musicians faltered. I felt a knot of ice form in my stomach. The two acolytes flanking Vex made a sign of frantic binary prayer. To suggest the Omnissiah was ever merely a man was the gravest of heresies to these people. It was like telling a cardinal from the ecclesiarchy that the God Emperor was just a talented politician. Archmagos Vex's augmetic eyes glowed a brighter, angrier red. "The motive force is eternal. It is the holy spark of all machinery. Your statement is logged. Its blasphemy index is considerable. The viability of this compact is now subject to recalculation." Lucian's smile finally faltered. He saw at last that his charm was not just failing, but was actively toxic. He had taken the foundation of our entire negotiation, our dynasty's future fuel supply, and shattered it with a single boastful sentence. He tried to recover, to backtrack with flowery apologies. But the damage was done. The Xylosians stood, turned as one, with the synchronized precision of war servitors, and departed the hall, leaving my brother standing alone amidst the wilting feasts and the silent musicians. He looked small for the first time in his life, a gilded fool in a room full of mocking ghosts. I slipped away before he could see me. There was no triumph in my heart, only a hollow ache. It was proof, irrefutable, catastrophic proof. He was not just reckless, he was a danger. He placed his own ego, his own need to be the glorious, charming center of every room, above the dynasty's very survival. He would not just drag us to the depths. He would do it with a smile and a toast. My isolation became my shield. I sealed myself in my quarters, a Spartan suite of rooms compared to Lucian's, furnished not with trophies and silks, but with data consoles and tactical displays. The only decoration was a single age-faded pict capture on my desk. It showed two children, no older than 10, grinning aboard a shuttlecraft. A boy with a shock of blonde hair and a missing tooth, his arm thrown around his younger sister, a serious girl with dark hair and watchful eyes. He was pointing out the viewport at a swirling nebula, his expression one of pure, unadulterated joy. I was looking at him, a faint smile on my own face, content to be in his orbit. We were an anchor and a sail then, not in opposition, but in harmony. I stared at the Pict for a long, silent hour, and I allowed myself to grieve. I wept for the boy in the picture, for the brother I loved, the brother who had died long ago, replaced by the charismatic caricature who had just doomed our most vital negotiation. I wept for the girl, for the sister who had to perform the final, terrible amputation to save the body of the dynasty. When the tears finally stopped, the cold had returned, purer and stronger than before. The codicil was a mandate. Lucian's failure was the justification. My grief was the final sacrifice. The decision was no longer a question. It was a simple, logical imperative. The serpent required a single head. I was the only viable candidate. My task now was to remove the other. It could not be a simple act of violence. An open assassination would fracture the dynasty, turn crew against crew, and invite predation from our rivals. It had to be subtle. An accident. An unfortunate consequence of the ship's age, or better yet, of Lucian's own recklessness. And the failing negotiations with Xylos provided the perfect stage. Lucian, desperate to redeem himself, would attempt some grand, foolish gesture, a personal appeal perhaps, a risky flight to the Forge Moon itself. His pride would demand it, and I would provide the means for his pride to kill him. I descended again, this time to the Enginarium Majoris. The air here was a blast furnace of heat, thick with the smell of ozone and promethium. The roar of the plasma drives was a physical force, a constant, deafening prayer to the motive force. I found Chief Engineer Mott, a man whose family had served the von Valerius line for longer than the ship's log could accurately recall. He was more machine than man, his face a patchwork of scarred flesh and brass augmetics, his voice a low rasp, filtered through a Vox grill. He respected data, efficiency, and proven results. He had little time for Lucian's grandstanding, but he held a grudging respect for my understanding of the ship's labyrinthine systems. I stood before him in the flickering glow of a diagnostic shrine, my voice barely raised above the thunder of the engines. I did not need to shout. Mott's audio receptors were far more precise than any organic ear. I brought to his attention a minor power fluctuation I had noticed in the plasma conduits feeding the dorsal shuttle bay.
the one that housed Lucian's personal, jewel-encrusted lander, the Star Chaser. I pointed out, on a data slate I had prepared, a cascade of theoretical system failures that could result from such a fluctuation, if not properly recalibrated. I suggested a controlled overload of the secondary couplings to purge the system. A risky, but, as I argued with cold logic, necessary procedure to prevent a larger catastrophe. It was a lie wrapped in a layer of truth, a fiction supported by a mountain of plausible data. It was the kind of complex preventative maintenance he understood. He studied my projections, his augmetic eye whirring as it scanned the calculations. He saw no malice, only my usual obsessive attention to detail. The overload I proposed would, for a fraction of a second, surge trillions of watts of raw power through a conduit that ran directly beneath the lander's launch cradle. The ship's ancient safeguards might hold, or they might not. And if they failed, just as a ship was launching, the result would be a catastrophic plasma detonation. An accident. A tragic, unavoidable consequence of our vessel's advanced age. Mott finally looked up from the slate, his glowing eye fixing on mine. The risk to the vessel is minimal, but the procedure is unorthodox. The timing would need to be precise. I trust your precision, Chief Engineer, I said, my voice as steady as the deck beneath my feet. Lord-Captain Lucian is restless. I suspect he may attempt a personal visit to Xylos soon, to amend for his diplomatic errors. It would be best if the shuttle bay was operating at peak efficiency before then.
We would not want any complications.
He nodded, a slow, metallic clank of his neck pistons. As you command, Lady Casilia. I will see to the recalibration personally. I gave him a slight nod of acknowledgement and turned away, walking back into the roaring heart of the ship. My transformation was complete. I was no longer a sister, no longer a daughter waiting for her inheritance. I was the will of the Warrant made flesh, the Serpent, preparing to shed a damaged and dangerous part of itself so that the whole could survive. I had just signed my brother's death warrant, and I had used the truth of his own character as the ink. The anchor was about to cut the sail loose, not to save itself, but to save the ship from the coming storm. The waiting was the hardest part. It was a stillness that felt like a scream held in the lungs, a state of perfect, terrible potential. I sat on the observation deck, a cavern of armored glass that stared into the velvet blackness of the void. A single, silent figure in the gloom. The stars did not twinkle out here. They were cold, hard points of light, merciless in their indifference. I tracked the flow of data on a slate in my lap, monitoring internal ship comms, energy distribution, and the status of the dorsal shuttle bay. Everything was proceeding with the chilling precision of a well-oiled killing machine. I was the machine's soul. It did not take long. Lucian's pride, as I had calculated, was a more potent fuel than any promethium. The comms channel crackled with his imperious commands. He was mustering his retinue of sycophants and houseguard, preparing his personal lander, the Star Chaser. He was going to Xylos. He would not fly under a flag of truce. but as a prince demanding an audience. He would salvage the deal through sheer, incandescent force of personality. He would prove me, the dreary logister, wrong.
I watched his energy signature move through the ship on my display. A bright, erratic comet, heading for its own destruction. He came to me before he left. I knew he would. It was part of the performance. He found me on the observation deck, the starlight carving his silhouette as he entered. He was dressed for war or a parade. It was often the same thing for him. His void black coat was replaced with a cuirass of silvered ceramite, polished to a mirror sheen. The jewel-encrusted pistol was still at his hip, a glittering absurdity. "There you are, little Anka," he said, his voice softer than I expected. He walked to my side, standing before the great window, looking out at the distant, hazy form of the Xylos Forge moon. "Come to watch the sail catch the solar wind?" "I came to watch the void," I replied, my voice a dead thing. "It is clarifying." He placed a hand on my shoulder, the same gesture he had used in our Father's sanctum. Then it had felt like a claim. Now it felt like a brand. "Do not worry, Casilia. I will fix this. I was a fool. I tried to charm a machine, to flatter a cogitator. I must speak to them in a language they understand. Power. I will land on their sacred moon, uninvited, and they will be so stunned by the audacity of it that they will have no choice but to listen. They respect strength. I will show them the strength of House von Valerius." His plan was as magnificent as it was suicidal. He saw a grand diplomatic stroke. I saw a moth flying into a flame lance. My plan was almost a mercy by comparison. "They will see it as an invasion, Lucian," I said, the words tasting like poison. A final, futile attempt to play the part of the cautious sister. He laughed, a genuine, warm sound that echoed in the vast empty space. It was the laugh from the picked capture, the laugh of the boy who saw only adventure in the unknown. "Then they will have to contend with me, but they won't. They are logicians, sister. They will calculate the cost of a conflict against the flagship of a rogue trader dynasty, and they will choose to talk. Trust me." He squeezed my shoulder. "When I return with the compact sealed, we will pour the finest amasec our father owns. We will rule this sector together, you with your charts and ledgers, and I with my spirit." He looked at me then, his eyes so full of fire and life, searching my face. For a moment, I saw a flicker of doubt in them, a question. He was looking for his sister, the girl who had always looked up to him, the anchor that gave his flight meaning. I met his gaze, my face a mask of sculpted ice. I gave him nothing. The sister he was looking for was already dead, a casualty of the codicil. I had rendered her unto the void myself. The doubt passed. He smiled again, a little sadder this time. "Keep the throne warm for us, Casilia." He leaned in and kissed my cheek. His lips were warm. My skin felt as though it had been seared by a branding iron. The serpent needs both its heads. Then he turned and walked away, his silvered armor gleaming in the starlight, a glorious, doomed knight marching off to a battle he could never win. Those were his last words to me, a final, tragic testament to his own blindness.
I did not watch him go. I turned back to my data slate, my fingers tracing the power flow schematics. The recalibration sequence was initiated. Engineer Mott was precise. I gave it 5 minutes. Then I stood and walked to the command deck. The bridge of the Gilded Serpent was quiet, the serfs and officers performing their duties with hushed efficiency. They all knew of the young Lord-Captain's rash venture. I could feel their apprehension, their whispered hopes for his success. I took my station at the tactical command throne, a lesser seat to the side of my father's empty, life-sustaining cradle. From here, I had a perfect view of the dorsal launch bay on the main hololith.
I watched the icon of the Star Chaser detach from its cradle. I heard the launch announcement over the internal vox, a dispassionate, synthesized voice counting down the sequence. I saw the energy levels in the adjacent plasma conduit spike, climbing far beyond their operational tolerances. The red line on my slate became a stark, vertical climb. Engineer Mott's unorthodox recalibration was perfectly timed. There was no sound in the void, but I felt it. A silent flash of incandescent white light erupted from the dorsal section of the ship on the hololith. The entire deck beneath my feet shuddered, a deep, groaning tremor that spoke of tortured metal. A wave of alarms blared to life at once, a cacophony of shrieking klaxons and panicked binary cant. On the screen, the icon for the Star Chaser had simply vanished, replaced by an expanding, chaotic cloud of wreckage and venting plasma. "Report!" I snapped, my voice cutting through the rising panic like a razor. It was the first time I had ever used that tone on the bridge, the tone of command, of absolute authority. A terrified-looking junior officer stared at his console, his face pale. "Massive energy discharge, dorsal launch bay, catastrophic failure of plasma conduit 3 Alpha. The Star Chaser, my Lord-Captain Lucian's vessel, it is gone. Destroyed." A collective gasp went through the bridge crew. Some made the sign of the Aquila. Others simply stared in horror. I felt their eyes turn to me, looking for guidance, for a reaction. I gave them one. I stood, my expression one of grim resolve, of sorrow tempered by steel. The grief I had purged in my chambers, I now wore as a mask for them to see. "Silence the alarms," I commanded, my voice ringing with an iron certainty I did not truly feel, but could project with perfect clarity. "Damage control teams to the dorsal hull. Seal all adjacent sectors. I want a full diagnostic from the Engineerium. Find out what caused the failure." As I gave the orders, a new alarm began to chime, a soft, mournful tone that cut through all the others. It came from the cradle in the center of the bridge. All heads turned towards it. The green line on my father's vital signs monitor, the one I had watched for so long, had flatlined. The shock of the explosion, the violent shudder of the ship, had been too much for the failing pump that was his heart. A Medicae servitor glided towards the throne, its scanner sweeping over my father's still form. Its vox emitter crackled. Biological functions ceased. Life signs negative. Lord-Captain Theos von Valerius is expired. In the space of a single minute, I had lost my brother and my father. In the space of a single minute, I had become the sole heir. The serpent had shed its skin and its old head all at once. I walked to the cradle, the crew parting before me like a tide. I looked down at the wasted thing that had been my father, and I saw it. His withered hand, curled in a claw-like grip, was clutching a small personal data slate, its screen dark. I gently prized it from his cold fingers. My biometric signature brought it to life. It was not a will. It was not a final order. It was a log, his last one, recorded in the lucid moments before his final decline. The text scrolled before me, his thoughts parsed into precise, cold script. They are a flawed pairing. The boy is all fire, but he will burn the house down. The girl is all ice, but she will freeze its heart. I gave them the Xylos Compact, a simple test of unity. They will fail. The boy's pride will not allow him to yield, and the girl's logic will not allow her to trust. The codicil must be invoked. The serpent cannot be broken. It falls to Casilia. She has the mind for it. She has the cruelty for it. She sees the equation for what it is. She will do what is necessary. It is a terrible burden to be my daughter. It is a greater burden to be my successor. May the Emperor forgive me for the monster I have made, and may the Void have mercy on the dynasty she will command. A wave of nausea, cold and profound, washed over me. This was not my choice. It was never my choice. It was his. He had not set a test to see who was worthy. He knew the outcome from the start. He knew Lucian would fail. He knew I would see the necessity of his removal. He had not placed us in a cage to see who would win. He had built the cage for me, to forge me into the predator he needed the dynasty to have. I was not just a murderer. I was a tool, honed to a perfect, sharp edge by the father I had just watched die. My brother's death was not my sin alone. It was my inheritance. I deleted the log. The truth would die with me. I turned from the body of my father and faced the crew. They were watching me, their faces a mixture of fear, grief, and expectation. They were waiting for a word, a sign. I looked past them, through the great viewport at the endless star-dusted night. I saw the floating debris of my brother's ship, glittering like a broken promise in the dark. I walked to the captain's throne, the true seat of power, now empty. Its metal was cold as I sat down. The arms felt vast, built for a larger man, for a line of patriarchs. I placed my hands upon them, my grip firm. This log is my final testament, and it is also my first command. My name is Casilia von Valerius, Lord-Captain of the Flagship, the Gilded Serpent, inheritor of the Warrant of Trade. I have paid the price for this throne. I have rendered my own heart unto the void. The serpent now has one head. It is cold, it is calculating, and it is whole. Let the galaxy burn. The dynasty will endure.